Well, I have good news for you today. And while the praise team is exiting, let me just tell you that we are starting a series having to do with the emptiness of Easter. Last week we talked about the empty cross, and today we're talking about the empty tomb. And next week we'll be talking about the empty burial clothes. The good news today is all about the empty tomb. What did Christ's tomb look like? You know, today in Southern California, when someone dies, chances are they'll be cremated. I just read where cremations have now surpassed burials in Southern California. So we pretty much have an idea of what a grave looks like in today's standards. But what did Christ's grave look like? Well, we look at the empty tomb. We can actually go outside of Jerusalem and we can find a tomb from the very first century. And it would look probably very much like this. You can see that there's a huge rock that rolls. One side is flat, so that when it's rolled into place, it doesn't roll out easily. And what you may not notice, unless I point it out to you, is that there's a grade to it, so that gravity helps that stone roll. So that stone can be rolled into place or can be rolled open. Now, this is the traditional site in Jerusalem for the resurrection of Jesus Christ. A church has been built on top of the site. So it's sort of almost impossible to see the site, if in fact it is the real site, which of course those who own it claim that it is, so you'll pay the fee to see it. So we don't know exactly if that's the site or not, but traditionally, for the last about 1,700 years, it's been thought to be the site. Now here is an artist's conception of what a tomb from the first century would look like. So this, remember, was Joseph of Arimathea's tomb that he gave to Jesus Christ, and the artist, on good authority, drew this, and it's a good illustration of what the tomb actually looked like. Now you can see in the very front that there's a small opening. I'm going to circle it here on the screen for you so you can see it. There's that small opening, and from the outside you could look in and you could see inside of the tomb. Now everything behind that opening has been sort of cut away so you can see in. But in reality, it would all be rock. So the only thing you could see would be this opening. And when you looked in the opening, you could see the body of whoever was in there. Now, just to the right of the circle that I drew on the screen, you can see that there's the big stone that could be rolled into place. Now, what happened is when they build the grave, when they made this, they actually made it with hammer and chisel. And when the workers would go in, they would actually dig a pit in the center of it. And on the screen, you can see that. You can see the pit. And once they dug the pit, then they could stand up. And then with their hammer and chisel, they could take care of the rock and chisel it away, and they could take the debris out then through the opening. But that's what the tomb looked like. That's where Jesus Christ rose from the grave and is the hope of all Christians. The Bible tells us that when he rose from the dead, there was a terrible earthquake, and an angel appeared. Now, those of us who live in California, especially Southern California, we know all about earthquakes, don't we? I've been in several earthquakes since we've moved to California. And believe it or not, I was actually in 2 earthquakes in Ohio when I used to live there. But here we have earthquakes on a pretty regular basis. And we don't think much about it unless they're really big ones. And then, of course, they can be pretty scary. Well, can you imagine having a big earthquake and at the same time an angel appears? Well, the guards were so frightened that they actually fainted. Now, to be a Roman guard, you had to be kind of macho. And it's not macho to faint. But these guys fainted away because of the earthquake and the angel. The Bible says in Matthew 28:4, the guards shook for fear of him and became like dead men. Can you imagine these Roman guards trembling and fainting? Well, they did. And then, that was very early on Sunday morning, then Mary was the first person at the tomb, and according to the watches, it would be between 3 and 6 a.m., probably a little closer to 6 a.m. And Mary came because she wanted to anoint the body of Jesus with special oils and spices, but not only that, the Jews believed that the individual's spirit lingered for 72 hours. And after 72 hours, the body would begin to decompose. And even though there were spices and ointments, the body would decompose and it would begin to smell. So they believed at that point that the spirit would leave because the spirit wouldn't be interested in sticking around with that type of odor. So what we find is that she came there expecting to be comforted by the spirit of the deceased Jesus Christ. And she was quite shocked and disappointed because initially Mary must have believed that the tomb was empty because of grave robbers. She didn't think Jesus Christ had been raised. She thought that the grave had been robbed. In fact, grave robbers were pretty common in that era. And so she came and was disappointed and brokenhearted that someone would steal away Jesus. First of all, they crucified him, and now someone has stolen his body. So she was saddened, no doubt. And then the Bible tells us that an angel sat down on the right side of the tomb on the rocks, and the angel says, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you are looking for Jesus. He is not here." For what? He is risen. This is the first time that someone announces that Jesus Christ has been raised. Can you imagine in her heart how she must have felt, how she leapt for joy? It must have been an incredible thing that he's not here, he has been raised, he is risen. Isn't that good news? Well, it was good news to Mary. The good news is that the tomb is empty, and this gives us all hope, doesn't it?